And today I'm going to show you something our open source blockchain carbon accounting project has been working on, transferring emissions through a supply chain. Imagine that there are two utilities, one providing natural gas and one providing electricity to a building. We want to figure out the emissions of the building based on the emissions of its utilities. And then we want to be able to figure out the emissions of the tenant based on the emissions of the building. So the utilities provide energy in different units like therms, kilowatt hours to the building, and then the building owner provides space to the tenant in square feet. With the open source blockchain carbon accounting project, the emissions of both utilities are calculated in tons of CO2 equivalent and tokenized as audited emissions tokens. And then they're transferred in their therms or kilowatt hours to the building owner with carbon tracker tokens. The building can then get its own audited emissions token and then create carbon tracker tokens based on the amount of leasable space in square feet. These can then be transferred to the tenants, who can then use them to calculate their own emissions. So here's where we start with the audited emissions of a natural gas utility, 65.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent for the natural gas it provides. And it provides about 10 billion therms of energy. So we're going to combine the downstream emissions of the natural gas with the fugitive methane emissions of the utility together to create a carbon tracker token for this quantity. And similarly, an electric utility that provides about 17.25 billion kilowatt hours, we can combine its combustion scope 1 electricity generating emissions with their vehicle fleet emissions and also other producers' electricity, which is scope 2 emissions. And we can roll all these together into a carbon tracker token. And both of these are transferred to a building which has used 350 therms of natural gas and 14,500 kilowatt hours. So this is how much the emissions of the building are going to be. And now the building can create its own carbon tracker for 60,000 square feet, combining its natural gas and electricity emissions here. And finally, it gets them through to the tenant of the building, which has leased 3,000 square feet here. And they can calculate their emissions based on that. So this could be deployed on any Ethereum compatible network, public or private. For example, we've deployed it on Avalanche's mainnet and testnet. So what is the advantage of doing all this? Currently, a lot of emissions accounting is based on averages and not on actual products. We want to fix that and allow a way to calculate emissions from actual products, because only then could we correctly account for the emissions of an actual company or product using the emissions records of the products and services that it actually consumed rather than some national average. And this is important because then you can create incentives and financial instruments for companies to actually reduce their emissions. Otherwise, a company, a building could reduce their emissions, but if its customers are still going to account for its products using some national average, then there's not much benefit to doing so, right? And then why are we using the blockchain? What's great about the blockchain is once the data is stored, it creates an immutable record. It's open and transparent on the network, and yet at the same time, it's pseudo-anonymous, so that the transacting parties can reveal their identities to whomever they want to, while at the same time, the data will always be there, and there won't be questions of it being altered or somebody using data that's incorrect or falsified to do their emissions accounting. And when you go through all the things that are required to make sure that this happens, the blockchain or distributed ledger is actually the easiest way to do it. So that's this demo. You can try it out on the Avalanche test network here. And if you want to see more about what we're doing, subscribe to the email or connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or ideas, send me an email.